Won't you take me back to Tennessee?
The award-winning Tennessee WildCast is on the air with the latest info about hunting, fishing, boating, and wildlife watching. Now make welcome your host, drummer and outdoor expert novice, Jason Harmon.
Hello, everybody. Welcome into this edition of Tennessee WildCast. We're glad you're tuning in. We've got an awesome show lined up for you today. We're at the Herb Parsons Refuge and Bill Dance State Fishing Area for today's show, and we've got Tim Ward with us. He's an officer here in the area, and Miss Amy Spencer is helping me co-host today. She's our public information officer here in the West Tennessee area, and we got a show lined up for you today that's I think you're going to love. Wildlife Crime Uncovered, the Prison Poacher is what we're going to call it today. So our guys do amazing work out there in the field. Our officers are hard at work every day trying to protect what we love, the hunting and fishing of our state and the species that we love to go after, and couldn't do sportsmen wouldn't have the place that they have without our officers and the work that they do. So I look forward to highlighting this case, and anyway, thank you guys for being here. Tim, I want you to tell us a little bit about yourself. First off, tell the listeners about yourself and the role that you play here with TWRA.
Well, I appreciate y'all for having me. I'm currently the District 11 Lieutenant for TWRA. I was the Lauderdale County officer for about 13 years, and after being the officer, I took over the lieutenant position.
Total, what's your service as a game warden here in Tennessee?
Or I guess this would be 15.
Yeah,
this 15.
So what inspired you to be an officer? Did you grow up out in the outdoors and hunting and fishing?
I really didn't. When I was a kid, I grew up fishing. I didn't do a whole lot of hunting. My grandfather got me into hunting, and once I kind of got into hunting, it just took off from there. I just knew that was my passion.
Awesome. Yeah. We say this a lot, but I think a lot of people who start working for the agency, have at least some background in the outdoors and love to be out there, whether it's hunting, fishing, or hiking, or bird watching, whatever it may be. I've got some passion for the outdoors. But Amy, you want to kick us off here and kind of open up what this show is all about, and if you look around,
you can't miss it.
You can't miss these antlers.
Yeah, so
you got to go watch this show, folks.
Yeah, you're looking at 491 inches. Well, 491 and 5/8 inches in 3 deer, and this one right here is a beautiful double drop tine 15 point. And this gets your attention, and this deer in particular is kind of what set this case off. Tim, how you kind of knew about the deer and where we went with it?
So as you can tell by looking at this deer, it's a one of a kind, very, very, very unique deer. Kind of what had spearheaded it is I had actually received a picture of this deer alive back in Christmas Eve of 2023. So I've been sitting on a picture of that deer alive for quite some time, and when the deer ended up getting killed, that kind of spearheaded the whole investigation.
Yeah, like who had killed this deer and where did it come? Yep. Where'd it go? Tell folks where this case kind of took place.
So it happened in Lauderdale County, and in Lauderdale County there is the West Tennessee State Penitentiary down in Henning. It's a lot of acres. It's a lot of land. It's probably roughly somewhere around 6,000 acres of land right along the Hatchie River. So it's Hatchie River bottoms. It's got a little bit of the Mississippi River bottoms as well below the bluff. So it can hold a lot of big deer.
Yeah. And
one thing we should mention is hunting is not allowed on the penitentiary, so this is where the case starts with these deer.
Yeah.
In general. So,
and that's where I was headed. Is this property fenced?
It's not, because a lot of it is farmed.
Gotcha.
A lot of the farming is done by the actual trustees that are in prison. They do a lot of the farming and stuff. There's probably been maybe about 7 different wardens since I've been in Lauderdale County, and every time there's been a warden, I've always contacted the warden to kind of see what their stance is and take is on hunting. Mm-hmm. And every warden that I've come across, agree that no hunting should be allowed on the prison.
Yeah, so it's been that way for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Have you ever had any previous issues before this case with people hunting on the property?
There's always been kind of speculation that there had been hunting on the prison. Right there around the prison, it's a lot of private. So when there's a shot, 6,000 acres is a pretty big piece of property. So when there's a shot that comes, when people hunt on both sides and, hey, did you shoot? No, I didn't shoot. And there's a shot in between. where did it come from? It would have had to come off the prison. So there's always been speculation that it's somebody had been hunting on the prison.
Yeah, pretty good evidence there. You know?
Yeah.
So, what were some of the difficulties in this case? Trying to make this investigation and bring this person to justice, Mr. Sellers.
I would say one of the hardest difficulties with this whole case was he worked for the prison. He lived on the prison.
Oh, wow. Okay. All right.
So, when you approach the prison via the highway, it's a pretty long straightaway, long stretch of road, so you can see from afar. And when they live right there, you can't just sneak up there.
Mm-hmm.
Makes it kind of difficult on how you approach it.
Yeah. So,
Well, I guess we should talk about, with it being state penitentiary property,
Right.
what's the laws about bringing firearms on the property?
Well, obviously, I guess with it being a state penitentiary, you're not supposed to have firearms on the property unless otherwise authorized. I know I had kind of looked into some of those avenues because I wasn't, I assumed that there were any laws, but no charges were pursued as far as that happened because he lived on the prison. He was allowed, he had firearms in his house, and that was kind of outside of my wheelhouse. So I let them do what they wanted to do, and I kind of took over the wildlife side of the case.
wow. So he lived on the property, and that's a little different element there.
Uh-huh.
He's seeing these deer, every day probably, and
Yep.
and I've heard of cases outside of Tennessee, of course, but like listening to some podcasts and things of how people they see these animals and they get so excited about them and so just overtaken by their majesty or how big they are, and I gotta have that deer, and it turns people.
Yes.
It's crazy what these
Sometimes
deer can do.
big deer can make you make bad decisions.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah. So we knew you learned about the deer on Christmas. The year before? 2
It would
years?
have been 2023.
So, all right. So after you found out that he's basically been killed, tell us about that. After that, when you started investigating.
So the moment that I realized the deer had been killed, as soon as I saw the picture, I knew it was the deer just because, like I said, the characteristics of it. I had to figure out, obviously, you got to find the ways and how you can prove it, because if you can't prove it, then there's no case at all. So there's always, anytime there's a big quality deer like this killed, you always hear stuff. There's always rumors, and there was a lot of speculation that this deer had come from this area. This deer came from this area. No, it was over here. And deep down, I knew where it came from because I had proof of where he lived at some point in time, and they're not going to just really drastically travel or disperse if it's a big mature deer like that. He's probably settled in his home range, and I just thought if I could find some other avenues to kind of pinpoint where where the hunter would have been, or prove where he would have been, if I could have just proved he was there, then I would have the evidence I needed to make the case.
Yeah. Can you tell us a little bit about how the surveillance and some of the things you had to do there, and talk a little bit about how a tip here and there goes a long way with you guys, and how you can investigate that tip and move forward on some of those?
I never would imagine receiving a picture of a live deer would have ever resulted in a case. I mean, I hung on to the picture just because it's a cool deer, and I just hung on to it, and never would I've ever imagined that it would end up turning into a big deer case like this. I knew that other deer had been killed. I just had no proof of it
on the property.
Yeah. And sometimes you got to get lucky.
Were these the two that are on the side of us? If you're watching, you'll see them. But are these the ones that you knew about, or you were aware of, or?
I knew that that one had been killed.
Okay.
I know that one had.
One on my left here.
Yes, and I didn't know where exactly. I had like I said, it's all just speculation on the front end, and I had speculation that one had been killed on the prison. And then when I go look at the harvest, that one was checked in a different county. So I knew that would open up some different avenues of how I could question people and approach people and question that deer in particular to see if I, to find out if that deer had been killed on the prison.
Yeah, so that was one of my other questions, like checking them in. So were all these deer checked in?
So all three of these were checked in. That one was checked in the wrong county, but all three were checked in, yes.
Yeah. So, I guess you speculate, you have questions around that sometimes, but if they're checked in, I think, okay, they're obeying the law. It's been checked in. They've done the right process, but that's not always the case.
Right.
There's still investigations there.
When you started this investigation and it being on state penitentiary property, were there any other unique situations like people trying to hide evidence, or were people forthcoming, or, you want to go into some of that?
So I guess, when you realize that something had happened, my first instinct was to try to prove that they were there. And when I found the proof to get the evidence of putting them there, there was some evidence that kind of did try to get hid on me and deleted. But I guess due to just going the right routes and talking to the right people at the right time, ended up giving me the proof or that evidence that I needed.
Did you ever have anyone try to cover up? Well, we kind of mentioned that.
Yep.
But did you have any other interferences with the case that you can mention?
The only interference I really had was I had a lot of text messages and the pictures get deleted.
Okay, yeah.
Regarding the deer.
Yeah.
And this one deer in particular, because as soon as the wind had kind of caught that I knew about it, text messages and pictures started getting deleted.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, what about maybe the deer that might have been killed before this, or maybe future deer? Do you have confidence that you've uncovered all the potential illegal activity on that property?
No.
Can you show? I mean, it's like I said earlier, it's amazing what deer will make you do, and yet people are still going to break the law there.
The prison, like I said, it borders the Hatchie River, so people could be coming in by boat, and you'd never know unless you were down there, and that's the hard part. Unless you're sitting on the bank, if you've got a boat tied up, they're going to see your boat, so they're going to know, okay, somebody's around or something like that. So just that amount of acreage and land, it's hard to cover all that. So it's a lot of land.
Yeah, and the fact that it's not fenced,
Right.
It's wide open and very enticing, I guess, for some people.
Yeah, and once you get on the Mississippi River bottom side of the property, it does border and butt up to one of our WMAs. Mm-hmm. So hunting is allowed on that WMA. So now that these people have heard about these or seen these deer, heard about this case and stuff, it's enticing them to go hunt on the WMA, and hopefully nobody comes the other way.
Yeah.
Yeah, because you definitely don't want people to continue to hunt illegally on the penitentiary. So.
Right.
Yeah. No, that's and then I think after this, you probably scared a few people off, hopefully, and people are rethinking the situations, and I'm glad, I'm very happy that you all were able to pull this case off and make a statement like this. That's just a lot of inches here. It's gonna raise a lot of eyebrows, and people are gonna be sharing it and talking about it. And
it's a lot of inches, and it takes a lot of manpower to pull something like this off. Yes, I did know about this deer. I've known about this deer for a while, but the amount of man hours, the other officers, the amount of help that goes into something like this is just, it's astronomical how much time and effort goes into something like this. Yeah. I really wish one time I would actually take a timer and try to keep track of it just to see.
Cases like this can have hundreds of hours and multiple officers, because you've got one person's looking at this, one person's looking at this, and then you're trying to confirm, you're trying to catch the lies, and it really is very time consuming, but it also gives you, there's such a satisfaction when you can make this case. This type of case.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you, you're still a commissioned officer. How does it make you feel that your coworkers are out there taking these guys down, guys and gals? It's not just guys.
Here's the thing. He stole from everyone else. Yep. And he's hunting somewhere illegally, and he's checking the deer in illegally. And man, it's so satisfactory just to be able to know that these type of cases are being made by our officers, because, this is what you do. And I'm telling you, how do I say this? The satisfaction that you get and the conviction that you get, it's an example to others to not do it. And the one thing I want people to realize is, even in this day and age, we're still gonna catch people. We're still gonna get that information, and our guys and women, men and women, work so hard to make these cases. And sometimes people get frustrated. Like, hey, I give them information and nothing's been done with it. Well, when Tim got this picture 2 years prior to this, somebody's probably thinking, well, hey, here's some information on a deer, and it might take you 2 years to get that case, but you got it. So you sit on the information and you do it when the time is right.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's, like I said, 2 years ago, if you'd have told me I'd be sitting here with this deer, I'd have said no.
Well,
But let's talk a little bit about Mr. Sellers. He was a correction officer there at West Tennessee State Penitentiary, and then let's talk about what the consequences were for stealing these deer from our hunters of Tennessee.
Mm-hmm.
So at the time, working at the prison, he was the facility manager. I know that the warden lived in, I don't think, there is a house there on the prison for the warden. I don't know if it's livable or not, but the warden did not live there. So every weekend he was, he went home. So essentially, I guess theoretically you had the grounds to yourself. And I guess, if you're the facility manager, if you're out on the grounds, it may not even raise a red flag. I don't know. I don't know how the prison works, and not trying to say anything, on the prison. I'm not familiar with that stuff. So, if he was on the grounds on the weekend, it may not have meant anything to anybody, or nobody speculated, nothing. So I'm trying to remember what all you asked.
Let's talk about the consequences that he got, the disposition, the case.
So the actual total, restitution is set up on TCA on what these deer are worth or considered to be valued at. All of three of these deer are over 11 points. So when it gets to be 11 points or more, it's $750 per point plus an extra $1,000 on that restitution. The total restitution, if it would have came out complete, would have been like over $32,000 on these three deer.
But you did have a plea on this case. Yes. He did plea, and then the restitution was $17,500, and then we had some taxidermy costs that have to be factored in on this. And I'll let you explain what this, and it means it's on this deer right here.
Yeah, because there was kind of a lot of talk about, like, why is there a taxidermy bill? And I like, a lot of these deer, when I seize them, they may be seized from the taxidermist. When I go and seize that deer from the taxidermist, I kind of feel bad, because in a way I feel like I'm taking money out of his pocket.
Yeah. So he didn't know. He didn't know what was going on.
Right. He don't know what's going on. He doesn't know that these deer are illegal. So I feel like if I can try to get that money put back in his pocket for what he thought he was going to get, I try to see that I can make that happen if I can, or throw in a recommendation. Can we have this taxidermy bill get paid so this guy gets his money, because I kind of took it from him. Mm-hmm. And if you had a relationship with the taxidermist, well, every time he comes to me, he's taking money out of my pocket. He's not going to work with you.
Yeah. I could see how your taxidermist and your processors could be your friend out there as you're.
And that's where the county officers can establish those relationships with the taxidermists and the processors. And, they can be some of your best friends when you're investigating a case.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they can be, and they've got a job to do too. So sometimes they're not very forthcoming, and that's fine.
Stuck between a rock and a hard place.
They're stuck between a rock and a hard place when it comes to illegal deer.
Yeah, I got the confirmation number.
Right.
Well, let's talk a little bit about the what's going to happen with these three deer, and then I really want to get into some details about them that really stand out, so people can kind of get a visual if you're listening out there. But what's the next step for these guys, these three deer?
So the next step, I picked them up today from the office and I brought them here. They were supposed to get mounted by this taxidermist, and a lot of the mounts, I guess, that are currently in the office a lot of them are relatively pretty old. Mm-hmm. I had reached out to the taxidermist and asked him what he what would he charge to have these deer mounted? Because this one is completely mounted. That one has not been completely finished because there's some things on it that needed touched up on, and some foam on it there where it hasn't been taken off because we we seized it before it all finished, and obviously this one hasn't even been started. And he kind of told me what was going to be done and told me what it would cost to go ahead and have that done, and we're going to end up having the work done and have this deer get completely mounted, and they're all three going to be mounted together and put up at the office
and used for education purposes and things like that. Yeah, it's great to be able to use these and move them around, even if you want to travel with them some and educate the public, kids and things, and use it at fairs and whatnot. But yeah, people wonder sometimes, what happens? Well, we can't store them all. If there's like the last case we talked about here on WildCast, you can't store all those deer. So, in some cases they have to be, gotten rid of, but we keep a few for educational purposes. Yeah.
So if you want to start over here on this one, we'll talk about this one. I've got it.
So if you're listening,
I was actually
to his right.
Yes, to the right. So I was actually pulling up the score sheets where we scored them in the office, and this one is gross score 151 and 7/8, and it is, but it's a pretty dang symmetrical 10.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's about as pretty.
Yeah, it's about as pretty
as you can get as far as the symmetrical deer.
Yeah.
Let's see.
And then this, let's see, what was the fifth? 15 point. Yeah,
Yep.
what was the 15
That'll
point?
be that one over there.
Oh, they're both 15s in. The drop, is this the?
This is 11, 13, and 15.
Oh, 15. Okay, so the drop time is a 13 pointer.
Yeah. So I'm trying to find.
I've got the score sheets for them right there in that folder.
Wow, no, that's okay.
I would like to. So roughly, this other one over here was to your left was 159 and 7/8.
Okay.
So that was the 159. Was he like one?
Yeah, he's 151.
Okay, and he was 170 something and some change.
Overall, came out to 491 inches.
491 and
What you're
5/8.
seeing right here.
Yeah, gross score. Yep.
Yeah. Wow.
Do you remember what year when they were killed on these other ones? We know when this one was killed.
So this one would have been killed in January of 25. That one, so this was the 24-5 deer season. That would have been the 23-24 deer season. And I'd have to go back and look on this one.
Okay.
But like I said, with the way the whole restitution came out, I just had the whole total of restitution. And, when it comes to the violations with hunt laws, there's no law that establishes X amount of years for revocation. So you can ask for however many years you want. You may get it, you may not, you may get more. So I just threw a number out there and had kind of, he had an attorney and they kind of countered, and then I countered with something different. And when the plea deal that was taken, that was my last counter, and they accepted that.
6 years.
Yep. 6 years revocation, 17.5, I think, in restitution.
Explain revocation to the folks out there listening that may not understand that.
So the revocation was 6 years revocation, so he cannot hunt for 6 years.
Okay.
The way the restitution works, the restitution was $17,500. Until that $17,500 is paid in full, he's revoked as well if he doesn't pay it within the 6 years.
Okay. All right. That's cool. Folks may not understand that. Like the last show we did, the guy had a lifetime ban from hunting, all those deer he killed. But and every case is different. So like you said, this one's 17.5 and 6 years. So what would you want to tell people who are thinking about doing this? I mean, as an officer.
The wrong way.
Yeah. I mean, people
way.
who are thinking, I'm going to illegal do this, or, what would you tell them?
I like to hunt too much. Yeah. So I'm just an outdoorsy person. If you took my if you took my privilege to go out and be able to hunt, I don't know what I would do. I really don't. I mean, that's just what I live to do. Obviously, my work revolves around it all the time. So if you took hunting away from me, I don't know what I would do. And I wouldn't. I just recommend not doing it so you don't have to worry about losing that.
Yeah. Yeah, you know how you would be affected by losing your right to do that. And then I'm sure how it feels, and for me too, like you're stealing from me. It's not your deer, it's the state, it's owned by the public.
And here's the thing. There were people legally hunting adjoining property near there that wanted the opportunity to kill this deer in particular. And I mean, when you've got somebody hunting somewhere where he shouldn't be, and this is what happens. I mean, I call it stealing from others, and it really was, because I mean, there's guys and gals that were hunting it hard.
Yeah,
everybody.
there was an individual that had a picture of this deer alive. That and there were several people that hunt next door that knew about the deer, and they were hoping that they would be able to kill the deer. Obviously.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, and so we got a few minutes here. They're stealing from everyone, but they're stealing from your kids. So your kids love to hunt. I've seen a few pictures. So tell us about your kids and how much fun it is getting them out there. I hear your daughter killed her first duck recently, and just share some of those stories. We'll wrap up on a fun note.
Yeah, I mean, that's kind of always been, growing up as you get older, having kids and taking your kids hunting and seeing your kids have success has probably been the greatest feeling as a hunter that I could ever experience in my life. Because, like I said, fortunately, my son, his very first deer was a really, really big deer. He still does not even have a clue. and I mean, I'm jealous of it because, when we were hunting, I looked at him and I said, "Do you want to watch me shoot this deer?" And he looked up at me as serious as he could be, and he said, "Daddy, can I shoot it?" And I thought for about 10 seconds, and I was like, "Man, you can't." I was like, "What's the worst that he do? He'll miss it," and he did not miss. And it's, my daughter, she's killed a few turkeys, and
and her first duck.
Yeah, she killed her first duck.
I was there.
Yeah, she came home saying, "For Christmas, I want a Super Black Eagle 3 because of."
You're welcome.
Yeah, thanks.
Well, yeah, I mean those times in the field with your kids, like you said, I don't even carry a gun anymore. Like I'm letting my son shoot, and my daughter wants to go.
Tim and Rachel, his wife, can explain, and you too. There is nothing like being there on that hunt, and they finally get their first deer, duck, turkey. I mean, it's one of the most memorable things you'll ever experience.
100%.
Well, thank you guys for being on here. Thanks for sharing this story with us, and kind of a little bit behind the scenes on how it all went down. And don't poach. I don't know how else to say it.
And one thing about it, man, our officers
stealing
every day do great work across the state. And here is a result of one of those great cases that they do.
Yep. Amen to that. Again, thank you guys for being here. Amy, thank you for co-hosting. Thank you guys out there for watching and listening. I hope you've enjoyed this edition of WildCast. Keep coming back, share it, and we'll see you next time.
Stay connected with TWRA by visiting our website at tnwildlife.org. And follow us on Facebook, X, and Instagram. You can invest in Tennessee's wildlife future by purchasing a license at GoOutdoorsTennessee.com. That's GoOutdoorsTennessee.com.